I hear rumors from all my contacts that there's an avalanche of macro hedge funds coming into the space, setting up accounts, like an increase by almost an order of magnitude.
Welcome to Dream Richer. Why do you think banks hate Bitcoin? It is a well-known narrative that governments are wary of Bitcoin, and larger banks want to slow down the Bitcoin adoption as much as possible. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India made a public statement addressing Bitcoin and crypto as a whole. They went as far as to say that private cryptocurrencies pose a significant threat to financial stability. But why? One of the biggest reasons behind this belief is that virtual assets pose a threat to customer protection, anti-money laundering efforts, and to the flow of capital at large. Some authorities even name Bitcoin a gold mine of terrorists and the underground market. Could this be the reason why these larger banks have not taken up Bitcoin? Today, Michael Saylor argues that regardless of these issues, Bitcoin has seen and will continue to see mass Bitcoin adoption. According to Saylor, the initial effects of mass adoption are already being seen. For example, last year the Bank of New York Mellon publicly announced that they will now begin to offer Bitcoin services. But where do the other banks stand on this? Could this be the start of the domino effect of Bitcoin adoption? If you find the video helpful, then don't forget to subscribe. Let's get right into it.
What do you think are going to be the key institutional or the key economic milestones looking forward that will drive Bitcoin adoption?
So I think we're seeing early signs of it. Basically, I think that the banking industry is still in the early innings of interfacing with the Bitcoin network. And so we've seen, for example, after the institutional grade custodians came in, you started to see some of the investment banks come in. You started to see custodian banks like Bank of New York Mellon get into the space, and now there's firms like NYDIG that are making it easier for commercial banks to offer Bitcoin related services. Basically, a lot of banks have been seeing that people would pull their capital out and send it over to places like Coinbase or other exchanges, and banks are saying, how can we retain more of that in our ecosystem? And so I think basically now you're seeing more and more integration. And so I think there are milestones to watch about more banks getting involved, maybe more insurance companies getting involved. I think another big thing that's really early is the RIA space. So there's tens of trillions of dollars of capital managed by RIAs. And they have all sorts of reporting requirements, rebalancing, needs. They need certain interfaces and certain things. And there are companies now like Swan Bitcoin and others that are starting to roll out more and more services aimed at them. And I think that's going to be a pretty big, I think, adoption story over the next 3 to 5 years as well.
Yeah, I feel like one interesting economic milestone we hit was just a few months ago when every government in the world acknowledged large amounts of consumer inflation, CPI and producer inflation, and it was acknowledged as an issue. I feel like a year ago it wasn't acknowledged, but today it is acknowledged. And probably the big economic driver that will continue will just be inflationary public policy. And if we acknowledge that we've got 5 or 6 or 7% inflation, there's no central bank in Western Europe or the United States that has articulated a plan to raise interest rates to 5 or 6 or 7%. So we're sitting in a zone for the next 3 to 4 years where it looks like we've got negative real yields, we've got continual inflationary policy, and the discussion has moved into mainstream, the discussion of stagflation. I hear rumors from all my contacts that there's an avalanche of macro hedge funds coming into the space, setting up accounts, like an increase by almost an order of magnitude. It used to be there was 1 or 2 macro traders, and now I think a lot of hedge funds are setting up accounts, and their view is we have to trade this stuff. Whether or not they'll stand up and say, I want to hold $1 billion or $10 billion of it for a decade, well, we're still waiting for that. But it seems like at the end of the year, at the end of 2021, I heard all sorts of stories that, conventional macro funds yielded 3 or 4% ROI in the year, and crypto hedge funds had 500% returns in the year, and 200% returns, and some had 1,000% returns and 100% returns.
A hedge fund uses a range of investment techniques and invests in a wide array of assets to generate a higher return for a given level of risk than what's expected of normal investments. In many cases, hedge funds are managed to generate a consistent level of return regardless of what the market does. Simply put, hedge funds do what we would call hedging. Hedging means reducing risk, although risk is usually a function of return, where the higher the risk, the higher the return. But a hedge fund manager must find ways to reduce risk without cutting into investment income. However, despite the inherent higher risk of Bitcoin investing, as Michael Saylor explained, many hedge funds are already deciding to enter the Bitcoin market, which is very good news for everyone invested in Bitcoin right now. But most of these hedge funds have still not gone all in on crypto. In a recent interview with Jason, the head of America's business development, this is what he had to say about hedge funds adopting crypto. They understand how to manage portfolio volatility. It's not for the faint of heart, but generally, what we see are long or short equity funds that have a carve out of maybe 5% to 10% of assets in crypto. It's a toe dip, not an all-in.
So if there's anything that people understand on Wall Street, it's money. I think if you look at the market versus 2 years ago, 2 years ago, there was crypto and the regulators were too busy to deal with it. No one wanted to deal with it. And it was like a fringe thing. And I think that with the new Biden administration and with the new set of financial regulators, we had a lot of very crypto sophisticated regulators come into the administration. And now I think there's a consensus amongst politicians, both in the administration and the Senate and Congress, that the crypto economy is here to stay, that they need to master and figure out what this means to the future of the finance industry, maybe the future of the world. What does this mean to America? What does it mean to Western Europe? What does it mean to any country? I feel like it wasn't on the agenda 18 months ago. Like you could have just dismissed it and said, well, doesn't matter, right? No public company owns this stuff. It wasn't important, and it was an offshore retail phenomenon. Now, instead of just calling it all crypto or cryptocurrency, which is a misnomer, I think that people are realizing that what we have here is digital property, digital currency, digital exchanges, digital securities, digital art, digital commodities, and digital derivatives. We've had a series of congressional hearings and senatorial hearings. And the consensus out of the hearings is that Bitcoin is property and not a security. I think that's a milestone. I think the denial of the spot ETFs and the approval of the futures ETFs, both of those are milestones in their own way. The approval of an ETF, and now we've got multiple ETFs to trade futures, was a milestone. I think that caused the CME to embrace trading of Bitcoin and derivatives and the like to a much higher volume than before. I think that's brought a lot more institutional money in the space. So I think that those are interesting milestones. So lack of FDIC guidance, lack of a spot ETF, the indefinite intangible, those are all negatives, but they're all on the agenda right now. The FDIC has taken up this as an agenda item. FASB has taken up digital asset accounting as an agenda item. And the spot ETF is obviously something that people feel very passionately about. They all are on the radar of regulators. They also all have reached the level of visibility in Congress and the Senate and the administration. We know that there's an executive order that's being prepared to accelerate crypto regulation and clarity. And so I think we're waiting to see what that says. But I think that regardless of what it says, it's going to be a milestone to accelerate institutional adoption of Bitcoin.
It's clear from Saylor's input that right now is perhaps the best time for all retail investors to take positions in Bitcoin. Why? Because the initial effects of large Bitcoin adoption are already becoming clear. Just recently, Mr. Joe Biden, the President of the United States, showed favor to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. As Mr. Saylor argues, once these governments, hedge and investment funds take positions in Bitcoin, then from there it's just a spectator's game, where all those invested will see their investments go to the moon. Do you agree with Saylor? To learn more about the latest crypto news, watch these videos here.